People of Earth, we have come to upgrade your cosmic consciousness. DNA activation ready. In 3, 2, 1.
Hi, welcome to Q&A on Breakthrough Leadership. I'm Lou Quinto.
And I'm Craig Anderson.
Craig, let's go ahead and let's pick up with where we left off last week with our interview with Ben Papa and talk about the Enneagram Assessment. And we went a little bit longer than we normally do in a typical Q&A on Breakthrough Leadership episode. So this gives us the opportunity for our very first actual two-part interview. So let's go and bring back Ben.
Let me take it to another level. So we've talked a lot about the individual. Take the assessment, we learn about our self-awareness, learn who we are. Now my question would be, now I've got my leadership team. Where do I look to the Enneagram on my team to say, is there value in a diversity of scores on my leadership team? And how do I want to look at that to say, and I guess the other part of that is, how does it help me manage my leadership team?
Yeah.
Two-part question for you, Ben.
Well, and there's a whole lot of answers to that. And I love working with leadership teams. And the first thing, what I want to start with is just straight up compassion. This idea that we all have something that we're carrying that's harder for us, given our Enneagram strategy, given our personality, that we didn't sign up for and can't fully change. And so when we know what it is that the people on our team are up against, we can have more compassion for how they're showing up in a situation, as opposed to taking on some sort of dualistic idea of I'm right and you're wrong. I call these Enneagram numbers operating systems. It's the data that we take in, how we metabolize it, and the behavior that comes out is going to be different for an 8 than it is a 2 or a 9 or a 1. And so that's one thing to just be aware of, the people that you may bump up against on the leadership team and not collaborate very well with. When you know what makes them tick and what their gifts are, you can actually leverage that more and have some compassion for them more. So that's one way just to kind of soften relationships with people that can get real siloed and competitive on leadership teams, which then makes the team function a lot more effectively in that way. Another answer to your question is leadership teams can be lopsided. So every number on the Enneagram is going to have one of 3 intelligence centers that it has the least access to. So there's thinking, feeling, and doing. And you all are probably familiar with what the differences are between those 3. They are distinct intelligence centers. We get distinct bodies of data from them. And every number on the Enneagram is going to have one of those that's just kind of asleep to. And if you have a leadership team, for example, where 3/4 of the leadership team is all feeling repressed, for example, then they may be struggling with conflict management. They may not collaborate well. Their communication may not be clear. They may not be very emotionally intelligent because they don't know what's going on in terms of their own feelings and emotional life, and therefore they're not able to act as effectively as a leader in that way. Or it may be doing repressed as a group. So they've got all these great plans and strategies, and they have well thought out models for how they're going to go somewhere, but they don't know how to operationalize it. They don't have the energy to actually get it into action, get deadlines on the calendar. And so when you know that about yourself collectively as a team, you can, just be more conscious about it. If you're not hiring, for example, and you just want to say, all right, if we work our Enneagram strategies blindly on autopilot, we're not going to be doing a good job with collaboration. And we know that for this project to be successful, we've got to be able to collaborate with this other company or this other department or whatever it is. So that's one thing. Or if you are adding leadership teams or boards of director members, you can say, we don't have anybody in our C-suite that leads with feelings. Let's get some people on the board to support us that we know are 4s or 2s or other numbers that are going to have a lot of access to that kind of emotional collaboration space. Because the Enneagram Intelligence Centers line up with organizational development competencies. So the Thinking Intelligence Center is all around self-awareness and leveraging strengths and managing weaknesses and all of that kind of internal assessment. Collaboration goes with the Feeling Intelligence Center and all the things that we just talked about with that. And engagement goes with the Doing Intelligence Center. And so to be successful as a leadership team, you've got to be tagging into all 3 of those competencies. And if you know your team is lopsided or whatever else I can go on and on about that, but those are a couple of I guess, nuggets about it.
Oh, that's very helpful.
So, and in fact, you jumped to it, and that was my next question. Again, based on my internet research here is talking about these three centers that you just mentioned, and you did a good job of explaining the feeling, the thinking, and the doing center. But let me ask you a question. Would that also mean that if you were lopsided with a group of people on a team that were very feeling centered, that their decision making would be based upon emotions, what other people think, as opposed to statistics, facts, information? Does that play into causing an obstacle in the actual, working of the group when it comes to problem solving, decision making, strategic planning?
Yeah.
And this is a trap. He wants to go against going with your gut. I can feel it coming. This is his hot button, Ben. Be careful.
Well, so balance is really the answer to your question. I mean, we, as a leader, you've really got to, and we all have all three intelligence centers, by the way. Let me be clear and explicit about that. We all have all three, and we're going to have habitual easy access to one of them, sort of secondary access to the second. And then the third one's the one that we're going to be kind of asleep to in various ways. So the work is to say, depending on the situation that I'm in or we're in as a team, which of these three spaces do we need to be using more of right now based on whatever the project or the issue is that's in front of us? So we want to do that kind of tactically. But to answer your question about a team that's feeling lopsided, for example, if you've got a lot of teams that are 2s and 4s and they're really good at collaboration and really good at communication and all that kind of stuff, they may very well not be strategic enough. They may be focusing on the people side of things and the relationship side of things and not being task oriented enough.
Right.
I'm not going back and looking at data or crunching numbers or, we're doing research around something. And so those are the kinds of things that can get lost. If you're thinking repressed number, for example, you're going to get into action oftentimes too quickly or relationally, emotionally, as opposed to slowing down and thinking about what needs to happen with something. So yes.
Talk to us about the benefits, because in almost 100 episodes, we have not interviewed, and Craig, correct me if I'm wrong here, anyone who has been an expert in any one assessment that's on the market. Is that correct, Craig? Do I have that right?
You are right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So talk to us again, thinking about our listeners and our viewers. Okay. I've heard all about the Enneagram, and I've heard about all these numbers and everything. Now, what do I, as the business owner, the leader of a major corporation, that I'm a leader of a team, a department, whatever it is, and I think, okay, there's something wrong with my group, and I need to move forward. How does it talk to us about your process, so that this way our listeners and viewers know that if I want someone to come in, what is the process of doing the assessment and then the consulting work on top of that?
Yeah. So if a leader calls me, or oftentimes it'll be sort of an HR business partner or leader who's sort of looking at the leadership team and recognizing issues. But one way or the other, somebody may call me and say, you know what, our leadership team is just out of sync with each other. There's siloing going on. We're not communicating well. We're not hitting business goals. People don't really like to come to leadership team meetings or whatever it might be. There's just some general malaise going on in that way. And what can I do for them? And so I'll come in, and the first thing I'll do is in the order of these things can vary a little bit, but on the front end of any project, I want to hear and figure out what's going on. So really kind of do some investigation work before I offer any sorts of solutions, to kind of hear from people, figure it out. Part of the investigation, at least working with me, typically is going to include figuring out people's Enneagram numbers. And so that can be taking an assessment, it can be talking to me. Some combination of the two is actually what it usually is, but we want to get clear about what people's Enneagram numbers are. Because part of what we want to do is shake up what's unconscious, or bring to the conscious what is unconscious or semi-conscious for people. Because we're all doing what we do because we do it that way. And we don't recognize that there may be other ways to engage with a set of facts or engage with a dynamic on a team or whatever, because we do it our way, because we think that's the way human beings are, because we're a human being. And so shaking up some of those presumptions and assumptions about things can be really helpful for getting through log jams.
Now, I'm going to interrupt you here because I want to stay on that. But now, do you share and do you encourage other people to share what their number is?
Yes.
So I mean, I'm a 3 and I'm damn proud of being a 3. I'm a 6 and I'm proud of being a 6. And so do you go through with the entire group of the strengths and weaknesses of each number so that this way the group has an understanding, because when you leave, they need to continue to work with that, obviously, because as a consultant, we always want them to continue to develop. So talk to me about real quickly about that process, about them telling each other, this is who I am.
Yeah, so I'm going to do a quick aside and then I'll answer that question very directly. The
Okay.
quick aside is I just want to be really clear that and people oftentimes misunderstand this idea about you are your number. Like
Right.
if you're a 1, you're a 1, and so you need to be the onest one that ever was. It's actually the opposite of that. It's actually telling you who you are not. It's
Right.
telling you what your ego strategy is to navigate the world. And there's a self that's deeper than that, more mature, more grounded, kind of the true essence of who you are that is distinct from your Enneagram number. Your Enneagram number is your ego style, and you can't do without it. We all have to have ego strategies, ego styles, but we don't want them to be any bigger than they need to be. We want to keep access to this more grounded, mature part of ourselves. And there's a virtue, is the word, that goes with each of the 9 numbers. And that virtue is sort of the portal between your Enneagram number and your truest, wholest self. And there's a whole thing we could do about that. But I want to push against the idea that when you know your number, you need to do everything you can to be your number every way you can think of. That's actually not what you want to do.
Okay.
To answer your question, let me just give you a typical example of if I go work with a leadership team, usually what I'll do is have the team take this Enneagram assessment online and then email me their results ahead of time. So then we'll usually have a minimum day-long staff retreat or leadership team retreat. I will have analyzed their numbers and done some mapping, and this is where you all are lopsided, or you don't have anybody that's thinking dominant, or you're all whatever. And so I'll do those kinds of things. Then the morning is usually more of a workshop, a very conversational kind of workshop, but it's introducing the team to the framework of what the Enneagram is as a leadership and organizational development tool. And it includes, to your question, going through all 9 numbers and pointing out what the strengths are, what the struggles are, and all the rest that goes with it, with the number descriptions. So we do that, we have lunch, and then the afternoon, really right after lunch, is what I do, sort of a group debrief, basically. So this is who you all are mapped out. Lou's a 3, Craig's a 9, Susie's a 4, whatever else. Here's what that means. Here's some connections that I'm seeing. Constantly stopping to check that out with the people in the room. Do you see how that can come up for you? Do you see patterns around this? Is it resonating? Those kinds of things. So we'll do that. And then the last part of the day varies depending on what's going on. But if there is, for example, conflict, then we'll start to think about how can we plant some seeds now that we know this about ourselves individually and ourselves collectively to do things differently. How do we meet each other where we are better? How do we manage ourselves differently? How do we show up with more curiosity? All those kinds of things. So we can do that. Sometimes it's a strategic plan that they need to then move into. Sometimes it's just trust building. If it's a new team that doesn't know each other well, integrating new members, those kinds of things. So that last piece is sort of a business-oriented, specific way of getting into that team's particular interests.
All right. Okay, good. And now, okay, so that's at the team level. Talk to Craig and I a little bit about the individual working to work with somebody that you're doing an executive coaching sessions, with, you're booked for, a period of weeks, months, whatever it might be. How the Enneagram becomes does it become a cornerstone of the work that you do when you coach an individual?
It is, cornerstone may give it a little bit more energy than I give it. It's certainly part of the initial process with everybody, and it is a touchstone that I tend to come back to frequently, again, because I think it reveals things about us and how we work that we're unconscious to, in ways that no other tool can do, and that's valuable. So the Enneagram isn't valuable because it's the Enneagram. The Enneagram is valuable because it develops self-awareness and a level of depth and nuance that we can't get any other way or as well from any other source, in my experience, in my opinion.
Right.
And so that's why we would come back to it. But for example, I have a brand new leadership coaching client who is super successful at what he does in terms of subject matter expertise. He's a high level expert in a very specific field, but he has moved from company to company over time on not good terms because he is very interpersonally caustic and he doesn't know how to deal with people in a good way. And so he keeps getting kicked out of roles he wants to be in. And it's keeping him ultimately from growing into what his capacity is because he keeps doing these lateral moves to places that are below his level of expertise. And so he's a brand new client, but we're going to start working on what is it that you can do when you're with your family, for example, and your close friends. He's in a long-term marriage. He's close to his adult children. He's successful in a certain context, but what is it about that we can carry over into work, or what switch goes off in your head when you go into professional mode that's in your way, that's based on some assumption or presumption that's not true, and it's actually blocking your ability to be effective at work. So I have no idea what will come of that work with him. Like I say, he's brand new, but those are the kinds of things we would do. And if we're successful, he'll be able to keep jobs for longer. He'll be able to grow. He'll be able to make more money, go into higher positions, those kinds of things. So that's really the end goal from a client's perspective.
Craig, are you a new client of Ben's? Did you want to tell me something?
Look at me, and I'm a 9. I don't think my 9 is anything like what Ben just described. So, no, my challenges were much different.
Yeah. Okay. So let me take you down. I'm going to give you an opportunity to take some swats at some of the other assessments that are out there. Tell me why I should consider Enneagram over other assessments. What are the benefits or the advantages, me as a leader, bringing you in to work with my team because I know they're dysfunctional, something's wrong, I've got to get to the root cause somehow. And unfortunately, all of the training or learning and development that I've paid for over the last 2 years hasn't worked. They're still, bickering and backstabbing each other. Okay, so talk to me about the benefits of the Enneagram compared to DISC, Myers-Briggs, social styles. I'm going to give you the opportunity to put Enneagram up front.
Yeah. And it's not the assessment that's valuable with the Enneagram. It's what you would know your Enneagram number one way or the other, either through a tool or a conversation or some combination of the two. But the one word answer to your question is depth. Those other tools don't have the depth or the nuance or the sophistication that the Enneagram does. So if you're a Myers-Briggs is based on external behavior, things you do, how you show up in the world, how you operate. The Enneagram is the only tool that's based on this core internal motivation that animates everything about how you think, everything you do personally, professionally, everywhere you go. This core internal motivation is there for you. And so because you know at that depth, whether or not you're an introvert or an extrovert and get energy from being around people or not is less powerful. It's a helpful piece of data, but it's less powerful than knowing that your core need is to be needed. For example, the core need of a 2 is to be needed. And you can really figure out what are all the things I'm doing to make people need me? How am I selling myself down the river in the name of meeting other people's needs? And what am I missing because I'm thinking repressed if I'm a 2? So what am I missing in terms of data and analysis and strategy because I'm so worried about relationships and connections and helping people and meeting needs? So that's a much richer conversation than, do I need to go out with friends for happy hour because I'm an extrovert, or do I just need to go home and have some alone time at the end of a stressful day? It's a question of depth in that way.
Yeah.
DISC is actually my least favorite widely used tool just because it's sort of a subset of Myers-Briggs. You really are only getting 2 of the 4 elements from it. And I think that's just even less helpful. You're not knowing.
And see, Ben, you brought up a good point, because with those other ones, you can, as an outsider, because it deals with external behaviors. If I'm your manager, I can start to say, okay, introvert, definitely, judgmental, and I can then put together those 4 letters, ENGT, whatever it is. For me, it was TGIF, and that meant people like to go out and party with me on Fridays. With social styles, it's, responsiveness and assertiveness, and I can quickly put you in that quadrant. And so I can then adapt or be more flexible with you because I know your style. But with the Enneagram, as you've said, this this information, it's who I am. It's not how other people see me, although they are going to see behaviors, because that's all, people, we judge other people by their behaviors and ourselves by our intentions. And in this particular instance, I want to develop myself. I'm dealing with my intentions now. I'm not dealing with my behaviors. Is that right? A correct summary?
Well, what I would say is your core motivation is really what you want to be awake to.
Okay.
And how that's showing up. Because if you know that what's motivating you and you can connect it to how you're showing up at home, or how you're showing up on a leadership team, or how you're showing up with your direct reports, that you're going to know something that's deeper than you would have known before. So the core need of a 9 is to avoid, for example, everything. And so when there's this sort of general pull from a person's 9-ness to sort of step back, or to check out, or to be disconnected in some way, it's not as though they have to collapse to that, because obviously 9s do all kinds of things. But if there's something internally going on that's pulling for this avoidance, this checking out, this not being present, this not being engaged, that's helpful to know. It's helpful to know if you're the 9 in particular, but also if you love a 9 or you work with a 9 and need to have a good relationship with them, it's helpful to know from that perspective too. In addition to the strengths, in addition to the weaknesses, that core motivation really is critical. But your point is well taken around, at the end of the day, this is personal internal work that we all do as individuals. We can share that with each other, and you can have a facilitator that facilitates a conversation among a team. But this is not something where you want to go to somebody and say, oh, you're a 1. I can tell you're a 1. You don't know the Enneagram and you don't know what 1 means, but I'm telling you, you're a 1. You don't want to do that with people, because you don't know, like a 1 and a 3, for you're a 3, I'm a 1. So our behaviors, for example, could be very similar. We're both active numbers. We're both engaged with a lot of stuff, but I'm doing it for a completely different internal reason than you are. And that can make all the difference in the world if we're trying to analyze something that's complex or difficult in some way.
Okay. All right. Interesting. All right. Well, I think you've given us some great information here. So let's go into what we normally do, is key takeaways. So Craig, why don't we start with you? What's your key takeaway from our interview with Ben Papa when it comes to Enneagrams?
Wow. Well, there's a lot to unpack in the Enneagram. So thanks, Ben, for all the detail there. I think the big one is just to understand how you can use this more for self-awareness than really anything else, to understand why you're reacting and where you're coming from in your behaviors. And I think that's where using a tool like this can really help you advance your career, find the right place for you to be, and to be in a place that you're comfortable. I also had a key takeaway that you're a TGIF on Myers-Briggs, which I didn't even know existed. So I learned something very big there, Lou.
Yeah, and I've changed, because I used to be an ASAP, so now I'm a TGIF. Okay, good. But my key takeaway is one, Ben, I can tell that you definitely haven't lost the lawyer in you. That'll be my first key takeaway, because you focused in on some of the words I said, like when I used, cornerstone, you were like, well, I wouldn't go that far. I felt a little legalese coming in, like, don't hold me to that. We're not going to get there. But no, my key takeaway is I want to learn more about this. This is one assessment that I may have brushed up against in the past, and because there wasn't a lot of discussion, it just went in one ear and out the other. But it's interesting, because I like the perspective from the psychological perspective, which goes back to, as you said, your undergraduate degree was in psychology, and you've gone back to that with the Enneagram, because you're truly dealing with the self. And to understand what makes me tick, what makes me operate, what are my strengths, what are my weaknesses, what do I need to watch out for? And I do like this assessment from that personal development. And I think this is one that I believe that from an executive coaching standpoint, in my opinion, would be a significant cornerstone in working with them. So, okay. Ben, what's your key takeaway?
We all named some really, really good ones. I guess something that neither of you really touched on is just this idea of of using this as a way to kind of have some compassion for yourself, to recognize that you're not going to do everything well. You're going to do certain things well based on your number, and you're going to have certain things that are just going to be harder for you. And I don't mean to be whiny and collapsed about that, but to have some sense of compassion for, we're not all going to be great at everything, and let me put myself in context where I'm going to be more likely to excel, and then to carry that out to other people. I really think compassion and empathy are two of the most underused leadership traits that are out there. It's hard to have buy-in to a leader or to a leader's message or his or her leadership if you don't think they care about you and they don't think they care about people in general. And again, we're talking about a right-sized level of compassion and engagement, not like some sappy people-pleasing all up in your business kind of stuff, but it's just more like, this is going to be tough for you, or I'm hearing you say this is a roadblock you keep running up against, and I have some compassion for that because I have my own roadblock that I've been running up against for 48 years now. And so let's just meet ourselves where we are. So that would be the thing I would add to what you all said too, is let it be a tool for compassion as a business tool and as a personal development tool.
Right, right. And I think overall, I'll step outside of the key takeaways here, is all of our listeners and viewers need to understand that assessments are just one piece of the entire dynamic puzzle when working with a team or working with an individual. And so it should not be the end all and be all. There is no assessment that should do that, because we've got different personalities. We're all different. We're snowflakes. We're the same, but we're different. And I mean snowflakes in a general way, not in a political way, but assessments are just one piece of the puzzle. And Ben, you provide that one piece of the puzzle for the individual. So we're glad that you took the opportunity to be with Craig and I on Q&A on Breakthrough Leadership. And before we end, if people want to reach out to you, Ben, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, my website's the easiest thing. It's just benjaminpapa.com, benjaminpapa.com. And there's ways to reach me there. There's a lot more information about the Enneagram there. My background's on there. Clients I've worked with are on there. So that's probably the best place for people to go.
Okay, terrific. All right, fantastic. Well, Ben, again, thank you for taking the time to be our guest on Q&A on Breakthrough Leadership. And for our listeners and viewers, if this piqued your interest, please be sure to get in touch with Ben, and maybe he can set you and your team on the right path. So Ben, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks guys. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Well, Lou, that was a deep dive we really did here on the Enneagram, or however we're supposed to pronounce it.
I guess it depends on which part of the country you're from. So
sure.
Ben being from the South, I think Enneagram came out, but I've always heard and pronounced it, but that's because we live in the North, Enneagram. So whichever way, potato.
And either way, probably the least most interesting part of what we covered in our interview with Ben. But check it out. Check out our future episodes on Q&A on Breakthrough Leadership at qaleadership.com, on all your favorite social media platforms and all your favorite podcasting platforms. New episodes go up every Thursday. So until next time, I'm Craig Anderson.
And keep your hands washed. Keep your distance. I'm Lou Quinto.